Some discoveries are never meant to be shared with the world. Hidden deep within, untouched wilderness, beyond marked trails and human noise, lie moments of nature so rare and powerful that witnessing them can change a person forever. When a lone explorer follows a set of strange tracks into an unknown part of the forest, he stumbles upon something no one was supposed to see, an ancient pattern of life, carefully protected by the land itself. What begins as curiosity becomes a life-altering experience that blurs the line between observer and intruder. Science and wonder, human and wild. This story is not just about what was seen. It is about what was learned about respect, silence, boundaries, and the quiet truth that some parts of the world still exist beyond human control. Once you enter this forest, you will never see nature the same way again. Evan had not planned to go so deep into the forest that afternoon. His original idea was simple: walk the main trail, take some pictures of birds and small animals, and return before dark. He had done this many times before. Nature was his comfort. When life felt heavy, the forest always seemed to understand him. The weather was calm, the sky light blue, and the air cool with the smell of pine and damp earth. Sunlight moved through the leaves like slow golden water. Evan followed the marked path with his camera around his neck, stopping often to photograph mushrooms, tree bark, and the soft tracks of deer in the mud. He noticed something unusual near a shallow creek: fresh paw prints that did not belong to any animal he usually saw. They were small, light, and close together, as if the animal had been moving carefully. Evan's interest was instantly awake. He crouched and examined them, then followed the direction they led. The prints slowly moved away from the main trail. Evan hesitated. The signpost he had passed earlier warned hikers not to leave the marked route. But the forest looked calm, and he had a good sense of direction. He told himself he would only go a short distance, take a few photos, and return. So he stepped off the path. At first the forest felt the same: trees, wind, birds. But after 10 minutes, the sound of the main trail faded. No more distant voices, no footsteps, no trail noise at all. Only leaves, branches, and his own breathing. The paw prints continued. They led him downhill through thicker trees and into an area he had never seen before. The ground changed from dirt to soft moss. Strange stones lay in patterns along the path, as if someone had placed them there on purpose. Feathers were tied to thin branches with dried grass. Evan stopped walking. This was not random. The forest around him felt different, quieter, heavier. Even the birds had gone silent. He lifted his camera and took pictures of the stones and feathers, unsure what he was looking at, but knowing it was something unusual. He had explored forests for years and never seen anything like this. The paw prints disappeared near a wide clearing. The clearing was almost perfectly round, surrounded by tall, dark trees. Moonlight had not yet arrived, but the late sun still touched the tops of the leaves, making the center glow faintly. In the middle of the clearing, more stones were arranged in circles. Twigs and dried leaves formed lines that crossed the ground like symbols. Evan stood at the edge, heart beating faster. This did not look natural. He crouched behind a fallen log and waited. He didn't know why, he only felt that he should. After several minutes, movement appeared near the trees on the far side. A fox stepped into the clearing. Its fur was silver-orange, clean and shining, and its eyes were alert. It paused and looked around, as if checking the space. Then another fox emerged. Then another. Soon, there were several of them, entering from different sides, all stopping near the stone circle in the center. Evan had seen foxes many times before, but he had never seen them behave like this. They did not chase each other. They did not hunt. They did not play. They walked with slow purpose, keeping space between each other, their tails low, their movements careful and controlled. Evan slowly raised his camera and began recording. The foxes moved in a loose pattern around the stones. Some sat, some stood. One scratched the ground with its paw and then stopped, as if following rules only they understood. Another lifted its head and made a low sound. Not a bark, not a call, something softer and deeper. Evan's breath became quiet. He barely moved. The light faded more. Shadows stretched across the clearing. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. Evan felt he was watching something ancient. His mind searched for logic. Territorial behavior, group communication, rare social movement. But none of his experience fit what he was seeing. This did not look like normal animal behavior. It looked planned. The stones, the feathers, the arrangement, the timing, all of it seemed connected. He wondered if local people knew about this place. He wondered how long it had existed. He also felt strongly that he should not be here. The foxes slowly changed positions, creating a loose circle. None of them looked directly at Evan, but he had the strange feeling they were aware of something beyond the forest. The air seemed charged, as if a storm were coming, though the sky was clear. Then one of the foxes stepped toward the center and lowered its head. The others became very still. Evan's fingers tightened around his camera. This was no normal moment. He did not yet understand what he was witnessing, but he knew it mattered. As the sun finally dipped behind the trees, the clearing grew darker. The shapes of the foxes becoming shadows around the stones. The forest around them remained silent. No insects. No birds. No wind. Only the slow movement of animals inside a circle they had created themselves. Evan swallowed. He felt like an observer of something private, something the forest had never intended for human eyes. And yet he could not look away. That was when he realized how far he had wandered from the trail. Evan stayed very still behind the fallen log. His legs had started to ache from crouching, but he did not dare to move. Even the smallest sound felt too loud in the deep quiet of the forest. The foxes continued their slow, careful movements. Each one seemed to know exactly where to go, as if they were following an invisible map. They were not rushing. Nothing about this felt wild or chaotic. It felt calm, controlled, and important. Evan kept filming in short bursts, careful not to let the camera click too loudly. He adjusted his focus again and again, trying to capture every detail. The way their tails brushed the ground. The way their ears turned as if listening to something far away. The soft lines of their shadows stretching across the clearing. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The forest remained quiet. The light faded more, and the clearing slowly filled with silver-gray dusk. A thin mist began to rise from the ground, curling around the stones and the fox's legs. It made the scene look unreal, like something from an old story. One fox stepped away from the circle and walked toward a small pile of feathers tied together with dried grass. It touched the feathers with its nose, then returned to its place. Another fox lowered itself onto the ground and stayed still, watching the others. Evan's heart beat harder. This was no random meeting. This was no chance behavior. He had read about animal patterns, group behavior, seasonal movement. But nothing he had studied explained what he was seeing. These foxes were doing something that seemed organized and meaningful in a way he had never witnessed. He thought about stepping back, about leaving the forest before night fully arrived. But his feet felt frozen. His eyes could not turn away from the clearing. A sudden feeling washed over him, not fear exactly, but the sense of being somewhere he did not belong. Like walking into a room where a conversation stopped because you entered. Evan slowly leaned forward, trying to hear better. A low sound drifted through the clearing. It did not come from the wind or the trees. It was soft, steady, almost like a hum. He could not tell if the sound came from one fox or many. The fox's ears lifted. Their bodies seemed to tighten, but they did not move away. They remained in their positions, watching the center of the circle. Evan's skin prickled. He had the strong feeling that he was witnessing a moment that happened only rarely. Perhaps once in a season, perhaps once in a lifetime. Time seemed to slow. The mist thickened. The light dimmed further. He thought about the paw prints that had led him here. They had been careful and close together, like the animal had walked with purpose. Now he understood why. The forest itself seemed to guide him to this place, though he could not explain how. Suddenly a twig snapped behind him. Evan's breath caught in his chest. He froze, listening. Nothing else moved. The foxes did not react. The sound had been small, but in the silence it felt loud as thunder. Evan's heart hammered. He gently shifted his weight, trying to be more comfortable, but even that tiny movement made the log beneath him creak softly. Still, the foxes remained focused on the clearing. One of them lifted its head and looked toward the sky, which had now turned a deep blue. A few faint stars appeared between the leaves overhead. The fox's eyes reflected the fading light, glowing faintly. Evan lowered his camera for a moment and simply watched. He felt both excited and uneasy. Excited because he had never seen anything like this. Uneasy because the scene felt personal, as if he were intruding on something that should remain unseen. The fox's movements became slower, more deliberate. They shifted their positions slightly, keeping the circle intact. Every step seemed chosen with care. Even their breathing appeared calm. Evan wondered how long they had been meeting in this place. Years? Generations? The stones and feathers suggested that this clearing had been used many times before. The forest had grown around it, protecting it, hiding it from the world, and now, by accident, Evan had stepped into its secret. A cool breeze passed through the clearing, making the mist drift and the leaves whisper. For a moment, the fox's forms blurred into the shadows and smoke, then returned, solid and still. Evan's camera battery flashed a warning light. He had been recording far longer than he realized. He turned it off. The silence returned, heavier than before. He stayed crouched, barely breathing, feeling the night settle around him. Somewhere far away, an owl called once, then went quiet. The foxes did not break their circle. Evan's mind raced with questions, but he knew he would not find answers tonight. All he could do was watch and remember. Evan stayed in his place as the night grew deeper. The warning light on his camera had gone dark, but he did not care anymore. This moment was no longer about recording. It was about understanding, or at least trying to. The foxes remained in their circle. The mist moved slowly around them like pale smoke. The forest felt alive in a quiet way, as if it were watching with him. Time passed, though Evan could not tell how much. His legs felt numb, but he did not shift. The clearing seemed outside of normal time, as if the world beyond the trees had paused. Then something changed. One fox, the one with the brightest silver-orange fur, stepped toward the center again. It lowered its head and stood very still. Another fox mirrored the movement from the opposite side of the circle. The others slowly adjusted their positions, keeping the same shape, their attention fixed on the middle. Evan's mind suddenly clicked. This was not a ritual in the human sense. This was not something strange or mysterious. This was something natural, something rare, something deeply important to them. A quiet understanding formed in him. This was a special moment in their lives, part of their natural cycle, something that happened only at certain times and only in certain places. The forest, the stones, the silence, all of it served a purpose. Evan felt both awe and discomfort. He had wandered into a private moment of the natural world. The fox's behavior became softer, calmer. They moved with respect for one another, keeping the circle steady, keeping the clearing peaceful. No chasing, no noise. Only presence. Evan slowly lowered his head for a moment, feeling a strange sense of apology, as if he were saying sorry to the forest itself. He understood now why the paw prints had been so careful, why the stones had been placed with such thought, why the forest had seemed to hold its breath. This was not something meant for him. The realization settled heavily in his chest. He considered standing up and leaving immediately, but the thought of making noise, of breaking the moment, stopped him. He chose to remain still, silent, and distant, like a shadow. The foxes did not look toward him. Their focus stayed within the circle. The night air cooled, brushing against Evan's face and hands. Somewhere nearby, water trickled over stone. He wondered how many people in the world had ever seen something like this. Probably very few. The scene continued without rush. The fox's movements were slow and careful. Every step felt meaningful. Evan felt like he was witnessing a page of a story written by the forest itself. one that had been unfolding long before he was born and would continue long after he was gone. He thought of all the times humans had rushed into nature, taking pictures, leaving marks, making noise. And here he was now, uninvited, watching something that did not belong to him. A deep respect filled him. After a long while, the fox with the silver-orange fur stepped back into the circle. The others relaxed slightly, their bodies no longer so tense. The energy in the clearing shifted, becoming quieter, calmer, almost peaceful. The mist thinned. The forest sounds slowly returned, a distant insect, the soft rustle of leaves, the low call of an owl. Life was moving again. Evan felt the moment closing. One by one, the foxes turned and walked toward the edges of the clearing. None of them ran. None of them hurried. They disappeared between the trees, their shapes fading into the darkness. Soon, the clearing was empty. Only the stones and feathers remained. Evan stayed still for a long time after they were gone. His heart beat slowly now. The forest no longer felt heavy. It felt normal again, though the memory of what he had seen made everything seem different. He finally stood up, his legs stiff, his body aching. He looked around the clearing with new eyes. What he had thought was a strange ritual was something far more important, a rare and natural event, deeply connected to the land and the life within it. He felt lucky, humbled, and slightly ashamed all at once. He knew he would never forget this night. Evan quietly stepped away from the fallen log and turned back toward the path he had taken. The forest seemed to guide him now. The stones, the feathers, the clearing faded behind him, hidden again among the trees. As he walked, he promised himself something. He would not speak of this place. He would not reveal its location. He would carry the story in his heart, not in his hands. Some moments are not meant to be shared with the world. Evan had only taken a few careful steps away from the clearing when something happened that made his heart jump. A branch cracked under his boot. The sound was sharp in the quiet forest, far louder than he expected. Evan froze in place. His breath caught in his chest. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, listening. The forest answered with silence. Then, from somewhere to his left, he heard movement. Light, fast, and controlled. Evan slowly turned his head. Two foxes had not gone far. They stood between the trees, their eyes reflecting the faint starlight. They were not running, not alarmed, only watching. Evan felt a deep wave of guilt wash over him. He realized that even though the main moment had passed, he was still inside their space, still present where he should not be. He slowly raised both hands, as if the foxes could understand the gesture. He whispered, barely moving his lips, "I'm leaving." The words felt small, but they mattered to him. The foxes remained still for another long second, then quietly slipped back into the trees. Their shapes vanished as if they had never been there. Evan waited again, making sure the forest was calm. Only then did he begin walking, each step chosen carefully, slowly, gently, trying not to disturb anything else. The path he had followed earlier no longer seemed clear. In the fading light, the forest looked different. Trees leaned closer together. Shadows thickened. The soft ground made it hard to tell which direction he had come from. He stopped. Panic rose in his chest. He turned in a slow circle, searching for any familiar shape. The fallen log was gone. The stones were gone. The clearing was already swallowed by darkness and trees. He was alone. Evan forced himself to breathe slowly. He remembered the advice he had once read: "When you are lost, do not rush. Stay calm. Think." He took off his backpack and sat on a low rock. The forest was not threatening him. It was simply being itself. After several minutes, he stood and began walking downhill. Water always led somewhere, he told himself. If he could find the creek again, he could follow it back toward the main trail. The forest floor sloped gently. He moved with care, using tree trunks for balance, stepping over roots and stones. His legs ached, but he did not stop. At last he heard it, the soft sound of running water. Relief filled him. He followed the sound, until the creek appeared, dark and narrow in the moonlight. He turned and walked alongside it, keeping the water to his right. His sense of direction slowly returned. As he walked, his mind replayed the clearing, the foxes, the strange stillness, the understanding he had felt. The forest no longer seemed ordinary. Every tree, every shadow felt deeper and more meaningful. After a long time, he saw something familiar. A broken tree with white bark, the same one he had passed earlier that afternoon. He smiled weakly. He was almost back. When he finally reached the main trail, the forest changed again. The path was wide and clear. The night sounds felt lighter. Evan let out a slow breath he did not know he had been holding. He followed the trail until he reached his car. The metal door felt solid and safe beneath his hand. When he sat inside, the quiet wrapped around him, and for the first time all night, he truly relaxed. He did not start the engine right away. He sat there, looking at his hands, at the faint dirt on his boots, at the camera resting beside him. The forest had given him something rare, not an image, not a story for attention, but an understanding. Some moments were not meant to be taken. They were meant to be witnessed and respected. After a while, Evan started the car and drove away, leaving the forest behind him. Evan did not sleep much that night. After reaching home, he placed his camera on the table, took off his jacket, and sat by the window with a cup of water in his hands. The city outside looked normal, streetlights, passing cars, distant voices, yet everything felt different to him now. The memory of the forest stayed bright in his mind, as if the night had followed him home. When he finally lay down, he closed his eyes and saw the clearing again. The stones, the soft mist, the quiet circle of foxes, the deep stillness of the forest. He did not feel fear. He felt something closer to respect. The next morning, Evan made coffee and opened his camera. He slowly went through the photos and short clips he had recorded. Earlier in the evening, before the moment had become too important to capture, most of what he had filmed showed the stones, the feathers, the early movements of the foxes before the light faded. The later part, the part that truly mattered, lived only in his memory. He considered sharing the images. He knew they would attract attention. Wildlife groups, magazines, researchers, many would want to see them. But as he looked at the screen, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. The forest had trusted him, in a way. He had been allowed to witness something rare. Turning it into a public story felt wrong. So he closed the file and placed the camera back in its case. For several days, Evan returned to his normal routine: work, errands, small conversations, daily noise. But inside him, something had changed. He noticed birds more. He listened longer to the wind. He paid attention to the spaces between sounds. One afternoon, he went back to the forest, not to the clearing, but to the main trail. He walked slowly, greeting the trees in his own quiet way, as if thanking them. He did not search for the stones or the feathers. He did not follow any paw prints. He simply walked, feeling connected to the place in a way he never had before. Weeks passed. Evan started writing. Not for a magazine, not for attention, just for himself. He wrote about the day he had taken the wrong turn, about the quiet clearing, about the moment he understood that some parts of nature are not meant to be disturbed or explained. He wrote about respect, about patience, about learning to observe without taking. The story filled many pages of his notebook. He never named the forest. He never described the location. The place belonged to the world, not to him. Sometimes when he felt stressed or tired, Evan would sit by the window at night and think about the foxes. He wondered if they still returned to that clearing, if the stones still rested where they had always been, if the forest still guarded its quiet secret. The memory became a guide for him. When he photographed animals now, he kept his distance. When he explored new places, he moved more slowly. When he spoke about nature, his words were softer. One evening, months later, Evan met a young photographer on the trail. The person was excited, eager to capture everything, stepping off the path without care. Evan gently reminded them to stay on the trail, to respect the space around them. The photographer laughed and said, It's just the woods. Evan smiled, but he did not agree. The forest was never just anything. That night, he added a final line to his notebook. Some moments are not